Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting day in mathematics. Whoop, whoop. Warm-up number 22 is on the screen. Shouldn't take you long if you already started on it. And today's going to be a challenging session. I'm just giving you a heads up. We did start last week. I did a soft intro to statistical studies. Today we're going to add more to that, so make sure you stay focused. All right, I'll give you some time. All right. Thank you for sending that in. Let's see, help us out, please. We need a mean. What'd you get for the mean? Jan 5.6. Hands if you got that. That is correct. From there, I need a standard deviation squared. Standard deviation squared. What'd you get for standard deviation? What is it? Oh, you can. Alex, what'd you get for standard deviation squared? 2.2. 2.24. Hands if you got something like that. All right. And then from there we need a standard deviation. What'd you get for standard deviation? Bree. 1.49. Hands if you got that. Looks about right. So our bell curve like this. We start with our mean, which is 5.6. 5.6. Our standard deviation is here and here. This is one up and one down. So it should be at 7.09. Yes? And 4.11. Yes? So our normal range, it's all the way from 411 to 7.09. All right? Hands if you got something like that. All right, thank you for sending that in. Copy the agenda, please. Agenda for today, warm-up number 22. We're going to continue and finalize, well, yes, mostly finalize observation and experimental studies today. And tonight's home play is only numbers 15 through 18, so it's only 4 problems. Oh, yeah, we got this. And once again, please stay focused, because today's one of those days that I give you different concepts within the concept, and you just need to make sure that you're understanding this as we move along. All right, and get a Cornell note ready after you copy that. For the weekend, there was no home plate. You guys enjoy your rest, yes? All right. Some of you were at the game on Friday, yeah? Yeah. Man, there's so much stuff going on at the game, aside from the game. It's a trip. Because my wife and I were parked over there in the back. I don't know if you saw the truck flashing the lights the time we scored. Yeah, that was me. Yeah, so it was a red truck, by the way. Yeah. So as we're watching the game, we're looking at people like walking around, like just like, we're like, what are they doing? Just walking around. And we're like, what? Anyway, I'm like, if you're going to the game, go to the game. So watch the game. I would assume. And then, and then there was this one family. They parked next to us, but the tree was blocking their view. So the guy, he brought some tree trimmers. Oh, snap, he started trimming. I was like, let's go. Right? Anyways, copy the code KWCNG. Yeah, and he had his little step ladder to step up and get the ones that were a little bit higher. I was like, okay, came prepared, right? Let's go. Yeah, yeah. All right, so your home clip for tonight is only 4 problems. Once again, if you notice, there's not a lot of numbers yet. We're about to get into numbers, but we're trying to clarify some of the concepts before we do. All right, our objective for today, I can identify statistical studies. I can identify statistical studies. So, we know what statistics are, is that correct? All right, on your screen, type me the definition for statistics, 30 seconds. By now, you should know it by heart. Statistics, type it in. Yep. What are statistics? We said they were the science of conducting studies, collecting, organizing, summarizing, analyzing, and at the end, drawing what? Conclusions. All right, so last week we started with observational versus experimental studies. So tell you the difference from one to the other. What's the difference between observational study to experimental study? All right. Good conversation, and just to refreshing your memory, last week I started with these two and I made it simple. I just said, I'm going to sit over there by the airport and just observe those that are going over the speed limit, which was 45 miles per hour, versus experimental that I brought in something to manipulate and to see if people would slow down. What did I bring in? My radar gun, and put a little poster in the back of where I was sitting saying radar at work, and that would hopefully create people to slow down. So today we're going to add a little bit more to this. So I want you to write this down and make these two boxes. For this one, for both of them, leave about 10 lines underneath so we can take notes in there for both. Statistical studies, once again, observational versus experimental. So to add to observational, I'm going to start with that. Observational, let me pause the tunes in the back. Observational, there's 3 most common observational studies. The first one is known as cross-sectional. Cross-sectional. What does that mean, Mr. Q? Cross-sectional is when you do a study and you go to a specific point in time and just look at that moment and make a study out of whatever it was. For example, let's say I wanted to do a study of the year that we went into distant learning. You guys remember that year? Distant learning, yes? And I wanted to see how good the students get at sleeping patterns, which you guys did pretty good, right? Yeah, it's like, Alex, can you answer the question? Oh, I'm sorry, my speaker and my mic aren't working well. Okay. My camera doesn't work. Remember all the excuses? And you guys were asleep or in the bathroom or whatever, or you were gaming, you know what I'm saying? So if I wanted to go do a snapshot study, I would go to that specific time and do a study. That's what we call cross-sectional, okay? Next, the other one is called retrospective. Retrospective is actually going to the past but looking at specific records, such as, let's say I wanted to go to the 70s, and I wanted to go and look at numbers in regards to accidents while driving in the 70s, okay? Then I forward and I did another study, and I went to look at data for the 90s, accidents as driving during the 90s. But then I wanted to compare it to 2010 when the smartphone came into play, accidents while driving. What do you think is going to happen? It's going to elevate, won't it? Why? Because of distracted drivers. And that's what we call a past record or retrospective study, observational. A third one, longitudinal. Longitudinal is when you actually study something or someone for a specific period of time. Let's say I asked you guys to go home and, I don't know, open a tomato, and from the tomato get the seeds, put them on the napkin, put them by the window, water them every day within the napkin till you see that it sprouts, and then put it in the pot, and then start studying how long it's taking to grow and all this and that. And all that time, all that data you're collecting is a longitudinal because you started, let's say today, and you're going to require time to study it. That's longitudinal. So once again, cross-sectional is when you go to a specific point in time and you look at something that you want to study. Retrospective, when you go back in time and look at data from those times and compare the data to do your study. And longitudinal is when you start at a certain time and you have to study it during that time to see what you're going to get as an outcome. Okay? Now, advantages. Write this down. What are they? They're usually in the natural setting. The other one advantage is that they cannot be manipulated. Another one is that special circumstances might occur that all of a sudden they're going to surprise us in some of those studies. However, there are disadvantages, and I think I kind of touched on that last week. One of them that I didn't talk about, but that it is a disadvantage, is you cannot show a cause and effect. Since you have nothing to do with your observation, you're just observing, you have nothing to do with what's going on around what you're observing, there's no cause or effect. The other one is that it's too expensive and time consuming. Expensive and time consuming. And the last one, there's inaccuracies in regards to foreign measures or anything that comes in during the study that might affect what you have already in your study, which is the observational study. All right? So, right now, we started with what? Observational. There's 3 different studies. So, I see some of you still taking notes. I'll give you a little bit more time. So I think we got it, yes? All right. So, turn your papers over, please, or your notes over. All right. So, with that said, talk to your neighbor, let them know what's the difference between cross-sectional, retrospective, and longitudinal studies, observational studies. What's the difference between one to the other? All right. We got it? Yes? All right. So, with that said, those are the 3 most common. And once again, observational, it's usually not beneficial for people that want results fast because it takes time and it takes a lot of money. Therefore, what is the one or statistical study that most focus on? Experimental. Now, within the experimental, there's 2 types. Write these down. There is scientific. So once again, within the experimental study is known as scientific. Now, why is it scientific, Mr. Q? Because on this one, people are chosen or groups are chosen at random, but you have control as to you're the one that's picking them at random. So for example, let's say I sent Serena, she's my statistician, and I tell her, can you go out to the quad during lunch, and I want you to pick some people at random, bring them back, and I'm going to give them $1 each. Well, guess what? She's going to go, pick at random, come back. That's what we call a scientific study, right? She's picking them. However, the second type of experimental study is known as quasi-experimental. Quasi-experimental. Now, what's the difference, Mr. Q? That quasi-experimental, you have no control in regards to picking the subject or the group. For example, what if I told Serena, Serena, can you go out to the quad during lunch and I want you to go to those that are seated over there at the lunch area, bring them all back. Did she choose randomly? No. She went specific to a place and to the group that I told her to bring back. So, you have no choice. Scientific, you choose randomly. Quasi, they're chosen for you. You already have them. Questions, comments on those two? Okay. Advantages. Well, first advantage is that you can manipulate the variables or anything that you introduce. Anything that you introduce, a situation, you can manipulate it. Second, you can get a cause and effect. Cause and effect. And also the studies become smaller and shorter versus observational, which means they cost a little bit less than the observational. Not a lot less. At times they do, but at least somewhat less. Disadvantages. They are expensive at times and also time consuming. They are usually not in natural settings. So in order for you to do an experiment, and I'm pretty sure some of you that got into chemistry and all that, you have labs that you do it within the class to see if it works or not. That's why it has to be within a controlled setting. However, there's also unethical practices. There's things that happen that shouldn't happen, and many times it has to do with human error. For example, let me pause the tunes in the back. Throughout the world, there's different labs going on, and there's different studies going on within those labs, such as maybe looking for viruses. What type of viruses can they find? How they reproduce? How can they counter one of those viruses being COVID? And you guys can know now what happened with that virus, right? Somehow it got out. Why? Because of unethical practices. Within those unethical practices, one thing that does affect is personal biases. Personal biases. Let's say Alec, he wanted to work with a certain type of virus, and he's so passionate about finding the cure for it that all of a sudden he starts like really risking certain things, like maybe staying longer hours in the lab, which means he gets tired, which means if you are tired in a lab as a human, you're going to make mistakes. Therefore, that's what happens. And the last one, also known as the Hawthorne effect. Hawthorne effect. What is that, Mr. Q? Well, it's an effect that even though it's nothing is mentioned, but it affects the outcome of the experiment. For example, check this out. Let's say right now we're in the middle of class, right? And there's some of you that are maybe on a website that you're not supposed to because I don't see your screens. But then all of a sudden Mr. Apodaca walks in and sits in the back. What is that going to affect the way you are on your electronic device? Yes. That's called the Hawthorne effect, where nobody says anything, but it affects the actual outcome of what's going on. Does that make sense? Yeah? So, once again, scientific versus experimental. So, without looking at the screen or your notes, tell your neighbor the difference between scientific and quasi-experimental. Difference between scientific. All right, I think we got it. Looks like Ethan Aguirre's got this one. Ethan, what is the difference between scientific versus quasi? Which means what? Scientific is random, yes. Quasi is intact, but what does that mean? Quasi, the groups or subjects are chosen for you. Yes, that is correct. And scientific? You choose randomly. Yes. We got it? Yes? All right. So, With that said, so far we know the differences between the two. We know the most common used ones. But the one that is used the most, guys, out of these two, observational and experimental, is experimental. Why? Because these are the ones that you can actually do in a setting where you can manipulate the subjects or the groups. Okay? So, write your utensils down, look up to the screen, please. Here it goes. So, let's say I wanted to do an experimental study. Usually, when there's an experimental study, there's different groups. But those two groups, or the groups are divided into two different types of groups. The first one is known as a treatment group. The other one is known as the control group. Now, focus so you can think this through. Once again, we're already in the experimental study, and I'm going to select two groups. Okay? So there's a treatment group, which is the one that you can manipulate by giving them a variable, like doing something. Whereas there's the other one that does not receive any information at all, not affected with anything. So let me show you how that works. Ready? Here we go. Focus. Let's say this class I divided into two groups, and you don't know who you are or in which group. And for one group, I'm going to stand at the door. Well, for all of you, I'm going to give you a fist bump, and you're walking in, welcome and hi and all this and that. But one of the groups, I'm going to tell them as they're walking in, I'm going to say, okay, just to let you know, I did notice you're not doing that well with some of your pop parte answers, so please stay focused throughout. And then here comes the next one, and I don't say anything, I just give them a fist bump. And then the next one, fist bump. Here comes another one from that same group, and I say, just to let you know, I noticed that your pop parte answers weren't accurate, so just stay focused today, da-da-da-da. So they come in. So what did I just do? Yeah, one group, I gave them a treatment, which was what? Telling them that they weren't doing well, whereas the other one, I didn't say anything to them, but we're in the same class. Does that make sense? Treatment group versus control group. Now, look up really quick. So when I do that experiment, I'm going to introduce something called the variable. There's two types. Actually, there's three, but let me show you the most common. The two types are dependent variable. That's when you introduce something to create a response. For example, pay attention to this one. When I was sitting over there at the airport, last week that I explained it, I was just observing, right? But then what did I introduce that was going to affect people slowing down? The poster and the radar gun, is that correct? That's what we call an independent variable. When you introduce something that's going to create a response to the situation or to the people that are being observed. Now, that's independent. The other one is known as dependent. What does that mean, Mr. Q? That means this. This is the first time I'm going to talk about this one, so pay attention. So once again, the independent was the radar gun and the poster. It creates a response. Dependent is when I finish my day of observing and doing that with a radar gun and all this and that, I put together a Google Doc, a survey, and I send it out to the residents of Imperial and ask them, have you guys noticed that the speed limit or the people from Broken Yoke to Imperial has the traffic slowed down a bit? Well, guess what? They respond, they give me something, I measure their response. That is what we call a dependent variable because it depends of what already happened in order for them to respond. Does that make sense? So copy that really quick before I talk about the third one. All right, so as you are sending your notes in on the previous one, tell your neighbor the difference between treatment group and control group without looking at your notes. What's the difference between treatment group and control group? All right. So Georgia, in your own words, treatment versus control. Yeah, treatment group, obvious, receives treatment, and the other one does not. Simple as that. And once we introduce the variable, what's the difference between independent and dependent? Tell your neighbor in your own words, what's the difference between independent and dependent? What would be the difference between independent and dependent? All right? An easy way to remember it, guys, is that when you introduce a variable independent, that variable independent is going to create a response. However, dependent, the dependent depends on whatever you introduced in order for you to measure what happened with that treatment. Okay? Now there's a third variable. Look up, please. Don't copy this really quick. Let me just explain it before you copy it. Confounding variable. It says influence or influence a dependent outcome that maybe it wasn't accounted for. For example, let me ask you a question. Stay focused. I said the other day that the speed limit from Broken Yoke to Imperial was what? 45 miles per hour. And then I was going to observe, and there's people speeding through. Question that wasn't brought up earlier or yet last week. Who do you think speeds the most through that section? Think about it first and talk it over with your neighbor. Who do you think speeds the most through that section? Who do you think speeds the most? Alex? Adults? Okay. Oh, yeah. I'm with you. There are some adults that are very hazardous, but the majority of those that are speeding, I can tell you this, they're young folks. You know, you could say teenagers or twin teenagers, whatever. But yeah, it's usually younger folks, and I can tell you this: I fall into that group when I was young, guys. I used to be very, I'm going to put it in nice words, dumb. I was very dumb at times when I was driving. Especially, I was influenced because I had you guys know what an RX-7 is? Okay, I had an RX-7 drop, black. I had a full system in it, chrome wheels. Man. But with that, in here, it just kind of like translated, oh, it's a sports car, you need to speed. No. Yes. No, I sold it, yeah. I got tired, okay, let me, okay, it's recording. So here goes. Story time. So, I had just graduated from high school, and then I was saving up for a car, and lo and behold, a friend of mine, he was older, his sister and them, they were going to get new vehicles, and one of the vehicles that they were going to go give in trade was an RX-7. I was like, you're going to give it in trade? Because you know when you give it in trade, they don't give you a lot of money for it. They just give you like $1,000. I said, can I buy it from you? They're like, yeah. How much do you want? He's like, give me $500. Woo! Let's go. No accidents, engine working well. You know, just a little, wear and tear here and there. So I put rims on it. I used to install. I was a mobile electronic tech, so I installed a full system. I started an alarm. I mean, the guys, you should have seen this car. Oh my goodness. The lights, I do. The lights are one of those that you turn them on and they flip up like that. Oh man. The top, you can take off the top. Let's go. Anyways. However, at that time, I had a lot of tickets. Why? Because of speeding. Not only that, anytime, and this is like, you're going to say, yeah, right. Anytime this one police officer saw me or saw the car, they turn on the lights on me and they pull me over all the time. And it was always something simple. Your brake light or blah, blah, blah. And they always gave me a ticket or a ticket. And it's like, so one of those times I had gone to Mexicali to go visit family. And I was like, I was kind of like a little frustrated because it was a nice car, but I was getting so many tickets racked up because of the car, in a sense. So I was coming back, and it was a hot day, and all of a sudden, you start seeing smoke coming from the engine. I'm like, oh, man. So then I turn off the car, and then I pop the trunk, the hood, and all of a sudden, I see a bunch of oil. I'm like, oh, man. So I said, whatever. So I just closed it. I pushed the car across, came to Calexico. As soon as I came to Calexico, I was working in Calexico at the time. I put it right there on the parking lot. I went across the street. I bought a for sale sign. I was so tired of that car already. I put a for sale sign on it. So then, and people knew the car. So right away, like 10 minutes later, he comes. These two young guys are like, "Are you serious selling the car?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "But it's as is. Let me explain." And I said, "This happened. It got overheated. Oil started spilling. So here are the two options. Number one, if it's your lucky day, it's only going to be a oil hose. You just need to add oil, and you're good. If it's not your lucky day and the engine needs to replace, you need to replace the engine. It's going to cost you some money." With that said, I said, "Give me $600." They're like, $600? That's it? I'm like I said, you might end up investing on the engine. They're like, "Okay, don't sell it." I said, "You know what? I'm going to sell it. Whoever brings me the money first, I'm going to sell it." So they just went to the bank, came back, boom. His friend brought his truck. They towed it. 2 hours later, they were driving it in town. It was just a hose. But I was already tired of it, so. But it is what it is. So, yeah. So the moral of the story, don't speed. Anyways, so going with that said, that's what we call a confounding variable. When we don't really think about what can affect the outcome, in that case, guess what? If I was to do the study on a day that it's the minimum day here at the high school, and I went over there and sat at 1 o'clock, how many teenagers do you think are going to be driving by? A lot, which means the speed limit is probably non-existent. So that's a confounding. So copy that last one, please, and I'm going to go to an example really quick. Hurry up, hurry up. It was a 1981 Mazda. 1981. Yeah. Yeah, the seals are usually the ones that go because of the overheated engine. All right. So let me go straight to the example for the remaining time. Here it goes. Once again, you have the code for finishing the notes. I'm going to read you the research. Ready? It reads, researchers randomly assign 10 people to 3 different groups. So look up to the screen. Question. First question. What kind of study was this? If we start, researchers randomly assign 10 people to 3 different groups. Tell you never what kind of study this is. Yeah, I heard experimental. Scientific, that is correct. Scientific. What gave it away, everyone? Randomly what? Assigned, that is correct. Next. What is the independent variable? So let me read it. Group 1 was instructed to write an essay about hassle of life. Group 2 was instructed to write an essay about the circumstances to be thankful. Group 3 was instructed to write an essay about feeling neutral. So what is the independent variable? What is the one thing that's going to have them do something? Yeah, write an essay. Write an essay and write an essay. So that's our independent variable. All right. So one is for hassles, the other one is for thankfulness, and the other one is neutral. Okay. Next, what is the dependent variable? So it says after the exercise they were given a what? A questionnaire. That is correct. Oh, questionnaire. All right. Question. What may be a confounding variable? What could affect it that wasn't really paid attention to? What could affect the outcome? Look at it. One of them is writing about hassles of life, another group about being thankful, another group about neutral. What do you think would be a confounding variable? What's that? Hold on. Before you leave. What could be a confounding variable? All right, earlier it was brought up, they said mental health, or if people are having a bad day, maybe it's going to affect the way they write. Sample size, we can leave it as to, it depends on what you are looking for. And do you agree with the conclusion, focusing on positive makes you more optimistic about life in general? I'd say yes, yeah. All right, have a good one, guys. Enjoy your home play. See you guys tomorrow. Everybody, everybody has their code, yes? All right.